want you to know the truth.
Hey everybody, thank you for being with us tonight. We're going to get right to our guests quickly tonight. I have so many questions, admire the organizing and work that I want to say she has done, but I could be wrong because I have never asked her, which is completely wrong with me. But I've been in spaces where she has just been incredibly uplifting, but also like super strong and just, I mean, for me, when I look at the work and all the stuff that Mary Hooks has done, it just gives me inspiration. So welcome again to Disrupt the Chaos. We're here Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. We will be here next week with a lot of dope guests. We're going to try to get all information out a little bit sooner, but I really appreciate everybody rocking with us as me and Tandy, our producer, try to make the show better and better every day. But we've had so many incredible guests, well, really organizers and movement folks, because that's the goal of the show. But usually I would do a longer editorial, but I'm tired. Like, I am tired, like physically, mentally, emotionally, just tired. And now that we're seeing half the country with these COVID infections and rising, especially Texas and California, to the two biggest states, right? And then I live in New York State, and then I live in Albany, New York. So ours wasn't as bad here, but as many critiques I have on Andrew Cuomo, the governor, here, and him using a lot of the work that particularly police reformers and those that fight against the police, that's one thing. But he has done an exceptional job, him and his team, for here in New York City, where our cases have dropped over 75%. With that being said, what's happening right now in New York City specifically, but the state of New York, which I think we're going to see in a lot of other states, Bill de Blasio, who is the mayor of New York, yesterday announced that they would most likely have to lay off 22,000 workers, mostly city workers. So we're talking about sanitation, children services, Board of Education, the parks and all that. And most of those people are African American and Latino people that are in those jobs, right? MTA layoffs. And he was blunt about it. He said that there's no money. I would disagree with that because there's always money when it comes to policing. And now they're beginning to use the excuse that gun violence has gone up. And it usually does that in these months in New York State, but they're using that to try not to cut more money from the budget. And right now there are hundreds of people in front of City Hall that are going to be there in New York City Hall, that are going to be there until they cut more money from the police. So, I think it's very important that other people in different states and cities, really look at what these mayors are about to do, which is they're going to use the excuse that they have to lay off all these workers, but yet they will still give money to the police. So we know half the country is surging right now. Today, this week, another 1.5 million people lost their jobs. That means 47 million people are unemployed. Again, most of those people are us, Black and brown folks, but also single mothers. The 600 extra that you were getting if you got unemployment or pandemic unemployment assistance, those end at the end of July, and the Senate is saying they will not re-up that. This yesterday, Trump closed the door, closed federal testing. So there's 17 sites that are federal testing sites. By the end of the month, he's shutting those down. The Senate is trying to stop any bill around police reform. And if you read the congressional bill, it's not even half of what we want, but I guess it'd be a decent start. But the Senate is like, it's not moving. So that's not going to move. And we're beginning to really look at studies that are studying pregnant women. Latina pregnant women are having the highest rates of COVID-19 infections and problematic deliveries. Even some have died. African American, Black, Latinx, Indigenous people are the ones really being affected by this crisis, the health crisis, but also the crisis of capitalism and poverty. And then half of Black businesses will no longer exist by the end of the summer. All right. I mean, and this is why I think we're all so tired. And even though we get to be home and have the privilege of working from home, a lot of us, I'm beginning to worry about people's mental health capacity, because these states that reopen, if they shut down, like, people can't handle your open, shut down, open, shut down. If we got kids, we don't know what the hell is happening in the schools. They're saying that it'll be staggered, it'll be online. Most all the summer youth deployment programs have been cut. Art is missing, like all these things that make you a human being, right? Being in a house, for how many more months, especially down south or the west, where it's just hot. Like Arizona right now, you cannot go to the Grand Canyon if you wanted to, because shoes are melting off people's feet because of the climate crisis. It's a lot, y'all. And as movement folks, we deal with all of this, but I just think as people in general, we have to just keep checking in on each other. We have to understand that our anxiety, our mental health is critical, and that no one should be alone, especially movement folks. Something I do, and I encourage other folks to do this. I'm a little crazy. I'll text all my comrades randomly once a week. How you doing? Check, give me the high five. I know you're good. Because I know that when I'm not feeling well, it's my comrades, that I talk to. And we should be able to admit that this is not fucking normal. None of this is normal. I mean, the American project is a failure, but this is a whole nother catastrophic level, right? And that's okay, especially if you're an organizer. There are so many things people could do, even if they can't be out on the streets. Okay, there's a time for vision, there's a time for reading, there's a time for writing, and that's what some folks are doing. And yes, we need all of that. That's what makes the movement. So let's go right now to our guests. First, I love the bio. Mary Hooks joined the song team as field organizer for the state of Alabama in March of 2011. The chapters of her life begin with a life of poverty, being parentless and shy. Eventually, the story unfolds a rebellious teenager who converts to a devoted Christian in Pentecostal church. I used to go to Pentecostal church, so I know what that means. Who comes out as a lesbian and left without the support of her foster or church family and stricken with tons of Christian guilt. The climax of the story occurs when, an undergrad at a private Lutheran college, Mary begins to redefine herself and discovered a radical desire to be a catalyst for change in the world. As she continues to navigate through movement work, she hopes that the folks she connects with are inspired to write their stories of self-determination, liberation, and love. And that should be the beginning of your memoir. Mary, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, yo. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you identify as she. Yeah. So can you tell everybody where you're at?
Yeah, I'm in what I call my dyke den, which is on my porch in Atlanta, Georgia right now.
So you're in Atlanta, Georgia?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There's a little feedback on your mic, so I think we can. I don't hear it now. Can you tell us just a little bit about the start of your life, but how you came into the movement work? Was it through song in 2011 when you joined as a field organizer?
Yeah, it was through song, and that was probably 2000, about 2008, 2009. I met a woman in the bar one night. I was out kicking it with my homies, doing what we do, picking up the ladies, and I was the wingman for one of my homies. And she asked me to go talk to Paris Hatcher. I didn't know it was Paris Hatcher. Many people may know Paris Hatcher. But I was like, trying to hook her up with my homegirl. And I asked her what she did for work. And she said she was trying to stop the shackling of Black women while giving birth in prison. And when she said that, it took me out. I was like, that's happening? And you doing something about it? you know, and I wasn't like in movement and nothing like that. Like I just moved to Atlanta in 2007, and we became all of us became homies at the end of that night. And I would just ask her stuff all the time about like, so there's people who like are organizing to like change stuff, you know what I mean? Because the watershed moments in my life you see happening in the world, Katrina, you know, 9/11, you know what I mean? Just these moments you don't have the politic or lens to like really understand what's going on. You just feel like mad, you feel like hurt, you know, but don't know.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm just average Negro, you know what I'm saying? It's still me. Um, and yeah, then she was like, yeah, I'm gonna introduce you to my political home song. And song had started uh did this 6 month like organizing 101 type situation. So I came in through bar outreach, I would say, and I came in through political education. So for 6 months, it was a training program. And trust when I say I didn't understand half the stuff they talked about. However, it's song, and so it also created a framework and practices that allowed me to connect my personal story and struggles of my people to a broader system of like. Can I cuss on your show? I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, like a
No,
broader
it's fine. We're fine.
a broader system of fuckery. And I'm like, oh, because I just thought, you know, when growing up, we're on drugs, my family and the addiction, whatever. I just thought it was our fault. I thought like we making some
Mm.
fucked up decisions, woo, woo, woo. And then that gave me a read, you know, and that changed my whole life. Changed my whole life. And I was like, I don't know exactly what this is, but it feel like gospel. And whatever y'all like need me to do, like I'm here for it. And they fucking organized me. I got organized. I was given an assignment, and that's how the work began. And then in 2013, I joined the staff full time after I had my kid.
Yeah, and I'm glad you shared that because I'm sure you've gotten this from younger people, especially college students who will often ask me like, "How did you become this?" Because most of us don't grow up in a movement household. I
Yeah,
did not, you know.
no,
So same thing. I had to go to college. I had to like decolonize the Catholic Church and all these things. And it was college and then my political home, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, that made me an organizer. So I'm always telling younger people, most of us do not grow up in a movement household. We know some of those people like Lumumba Bandeli, Monifa Bandeli. I mean, they grew up like Lumumba Bandeli grew up in what's called the East, but we came to it later. So you joined Song in 2011. You're now the co-director. Can you tell people what Song is, Southerners on New Ground, the organization?
yeah. So my political home song is a 28-year-old Southern LGBTQ organization organizing at the intersections of race, class, gender. You know, a lot of I think there's an interesting history about song, where a lot of our founders, when they started the organization, many of them were like 40s and up. You know what I mean? And these were three white lesbians and three black lesbians who had all come out of different movements, right? Anti-violence movement. You had Suzanne Farnham doing work in the on the Women's Project in Arkansas. Mandy Carter comes out of anti-war, organizing traditional civil rights movement, Quaker movement. You know, you had uh, uh, Mav Segrist doing anti-racist work. You had all these different threads of movement in which folks had done work in, and as lesbian women also understood the politic and came up in a time where you know, those who were doing work through the Combahee River Collective put out the thinking around we need to be able to bring our full selves when we come to do this work. You know, we can't be leaving parts of ourselves outside because folk ain't comfortable with us being gay, you know, or people ain't, you know, and understanding our lives are connected as well as systems. And they're like, yo, let's build a political home in the South for LGBTQ people who needs to be able to step into their rightful place around this liberation work. Because the mainstream LGBTQ rights movement, Real Talk, wasn't speaking to folk, you know, in the South and speaking to people who, you know, was experiencing being unsheltered in the Christian, what it meant to live in the Bible Belt, and also to be able to find each other. So yeah, and a lot of us, its initial song's initial strategy was infiltrating, going to other organizations. And part of the thinking was we need to move traditional civil rights organizations more left as it related to issues around gender and sexuality. And we need to move those who have been working on racial economic mainstream LGBTQ sector, moving them more left around racial and economic justice. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's how they begin to spread themselves out. And there's a lot of deep history here in terms of some of the key institutions in the South, like the Highlander. Suzanne Farr got on the board, and then was one of the first LGBTQ, Lil White Dyke, one of the first LGBTQ folk who was the director of the Highlander Center. And that was to be able to, Highlander, huge in terms of politically educating so many of us here in the South. And back then they were like, yo, we got to make sure they're moving a righteous politic around queer liberation and gender liberation. And so, yeah, that's and our work has looked, we're a membership-based organization. So we have chapters across the South. We have, what I was gonna say, we just started Song Power, which is also like testing out some C4 stuff. Some really good work happening around moving Lindsey Graham out of office, but also being able to, do some really cool stuff on this with our End Money Bail campaign fight. And we've obviously, given COVID, we were like immediately like, yo, y'all got to free them all. And so we began to push around, jails, making sure folks get released. And, have also been taking leadership inside of the movement for Black Lives. And I represent Song inside of that work. And that's been a blessing as well to continue to advance the work around defunding the police. And part of the, we also sit inside of the National Bailout Collective, which has expanded and broadened the work more than we even thought possible when we started around Black Mama's Day bailout. And continue to fight to get mothers out of jail and to change the way we understand pretrial detention.
Yeah, can you tell people about National Mama's Bailout? It was so powerful when you all first did it, and continues to be extremely powerful. And when you watch the videos and you have all these mothers or Black women coming out, and then you realize all of them are in there for like, either they've been abused, some sex trafficked, or some as these kind of what they call quality of life crimes that are completely nonviolent. And you see these moms come out. How did you all come up with the idea to do that, and how did it manifest?
Yeah, Spirit said, put that one out there. I don't even know how to best say it. Spirit put that on my heart. And we began talking about it inside a song about like, yo, let's spell out some Black mothers for Mother's Day. And I'm also holding an experience in which one time I got arrested. And I've been arrested a few times, but this time, like, I was being arrested while I was videotaping some police officers, try to take, they were like doing this search, whatever, was throwing these Black women out of this car. And I was videotaping. And then the moment I started yelling out, if they knew their rights, if they knew, yo, you ain't got to let him search your shit. You ain't got to talk to him. Who can I call? And I started talking about rights. 2 white boys, police officers, tackled me to the ground, whooped my ass, put me in jail, tried to say they found crack in my car. And I just remember sitting, and that happened in April of 2014. But I always, in my mind, in my spirit, thought about the ways in which, as we entered the work around bail, like, what about the folk that you don't anticipate when the state interrupts your life? You know what I mean? It's different when you like, all right, we're finna do this too. Whoop, I'm on red, so I'll go. You know what I mean? Versus like when you like going through the course of your day and the state interrupts your life and you ain't got time to get your care plan together. You know what I mean? Your shit is in there. Anyway, so that's Spirit called it. And then we were in a meeting one day with a set of folk inside of the movement for Black Lives who were doing work across the country around bail. And folks was like, and I was like, yo, we're going to try to bail out Black mothers for Mother's Day, do a mass bailout. And I was like, is this wild? Should we do it? Y'all down to do it? And folks were like, the yes that swept the room. The yes that swept the room immediately. Folks were like, all right, let's figure this out, you know? And we drafted a toolkit so folks could and did some political education, pushed that out. And you know, several organizations at the time, LA Can, SC Justice Group, um, Brooklyn Bail Fund was there. You also had a Chicago Bail Fund folk, charging them out of Texas. Like it was a, you know what I mean, a national spread of folk. And built the infrastructure to be able to invite other people from across the country to do it. And we was like, we want to raise the money. And not just in the spirit of like, it was a reminder to our people of what we done to get free, you know? Like we bought
Yeah.
this freedom before. And it wasn't just like a fundraising strategy for the you know, the foundations. It was like, nah, we gonna however much we get, that's what we gonna use. It don't matter. Like if we just get one person out, the fact that, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, that black people put their hand on the plow. Like we was out here on the street asking for money. And I remember this woman, she was unsheltered. She was like, I know I got $1. And we literally, she was like, don't leave. We waited about 10 minutes till she went through all her stuff so she could give her $1. And that and what that signals to our people in a time like this. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
this would call it prefigurative, I'm saying the word wrong, pejorative, prefigurative organizing, right? Like being able to model and to organize in the world we're trying to build, you know, and the types of people that we need to also be transformed by in the way in which we do it. The transformative organizing, I think, is the best way to name it, because I just remember the um the energy of it, the way every time we told people like, hey, we doing this, yo, y'all who want to help, people just said yes. And it was beautiful for people to see an effort for black mothers and caretakers, both, you know, trans, cis, old, young, and people be willing to do something for us, you know. That was beautiful. And that was beautiful, you know. And then also to think about how we are able to take what we're, because it ain't just like a little project we're doing when we go. Like, no, we've developed infrastructure to think about stabilization, because this whole conversation we're in about divest, invest, defund the police, invest in our people. Like, baby, we see what time it is. We know what our folk is missing, and what this system, how this system is so broken, and how it's so you know, like, and so that's also, I think, has deeply informed what then we are calling for right now, you know, and what are we calling for right now. And so that's why we know the little crumb police reform stuff won't do. You know, we know
Right.
for sure it's being funded the people.
Yeah, and we're going to show a video of you speaking, but I think what is amazing about the national bailout, you know, and the focus on Black women and other women who are in prison is that, you know, even even the amount of visits women get. I read this report a while ago where it says that less than 15% of women in prison ever get a visit. But if you look at the men in prison, it could be as high as 75, at least get a visit from a family member, whatever. And there's an infrastructure in place. So like in New York City, every Saturday, there's buses that go to Columbus Circle. I mean, on Thursday nights, Friday nights, Circle, to drive people up here where I'm at and all the way to the Canadian border, where most of the prisons are, for
Yeah.
the prisons for men. But if you look at Bedford Correctional Facility, which is outside of Westchester County, New York, they don't even have a bus that goes to Bedford. So many women do their time isolated and alone in that way. And I think this was something we do have to focus on to change the perception. And again, to realize that most women, again, that are in prison or incarcerated have already suffered from many forms of sexual abuse and violence. And they should not, well, you know, we're about abolishing prisons, period. But that's really important for us to remember. So we're going to show this video of you real quick.
Okay. I think one of the ways in which we've been talking about it, particularly around the Divest Invest, I know some of our folks in Charlotte coming out of this action, where in Charlotte get um, you cannot get any support for housing unless you prove that you have been homeless for 2 years. And so folks are like so turned up around it. And there was actually like this meeting that happened. Um, and a few meetings post that our folks have been engaged in those conversations around how do we shift that, and how are we actually pushing for those resources to be invested in our community. Um, I think on the feels like on the short term, um, as folks are thinking about this larger abolishment of bail, some of these short-term needs that we know need to be met, whether it's, you know, the need for more transitional housing, the need for more programs that allow people to get into stable, longer-term housing, how people can access, other resources, whether it's around medical and health, um, counseling and therapy, all of those sorts of things, jobs training and job support are so critical. And so that's been a lot of our conversation coming out of it. And we're also clear that that's also how we help undercut the market too, Um, I think some of the ways that we're also Mama's Day has also helped us begin um, rethinking in our framework around the risk assessments and folks that are in this conversation around bail reform. It's like, hey, bail reform means now people get rated based off the risk that they are going to be on community, and then you'll get let out or you won't get let out. And I'm like, actually, we know the conversation needs to be around needs assessment. What do people need? What do people need to be healthy, whole, stable? What do people need in order to, when it's all said and done, stand up and have their day in court? And so I think some of our short term is also just trying to push and change the language around needs assessment and risk assessment. And make that intervention, because I feel like now this is a conversation that's on a lot of and a lot of people's tongues, and people are talking about it. And you have lawyers, and you have different judges who are having meetings that want to talk about this. I'm like, if y'all are going to talk about it, we need y'all to be talking in this language at the very least. And so pushing out the 8 principles of bail reform has also been very huge. We've been sending those out to different key legislators and different commissioners or what have you. But like, if you're going to be talking about bail, if you're going to be thinking about bail reform, these are the principles you need to be looking at and measuring yourselves against. And so long term, I think that one of the things that we're deeply curious about is because a lot of as folks are thinking about bail reform, we're seeing that people are like, oh, well, we need to be able to test and measure how this is impacting communities and who is this working or not. And I'm like, how do we create the infrastructure so that it actually is community people who are actually the ones who are doing the study, who are actually measuring and monitoring if this is working or not, and making, recommendations for where it needs to be tweaked. And so, I was just talking to somebody the other day. I was like, the MacArthur people that keep giving money to all of these different places, where's community in that? How are communities being involved in those, in the changes and the different reforms that people are doing?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, in terms of the organizing that's happening now, or well, let me go back a little bit. I was trying to remember where I first met you. Now it came to me a couple minutes ago. It was in Chicago. It was at an event that Barbara Ransby had pulled together, and I would say maybe like a year after Black Lives Matter really exploded. I think because I was living in LA at that time and organizing with Patrice and Melina Abdullah. And we went and really, like, you were powerful, but you have this quote. The only word I remember is avenge. And I'm like, it's about the ancestors. So whenever you're ready to drop that, tell me, because the more I heard it, I was like, that's the work, And then moving for Black Lives, which is kind of the umbrella now of all these organizations, including Mi Gente and Dream Defenders and everything. And then, we're in this COVID moment, and then the George Floyd thing. When you saw that video and the immediate response, even though we're in this COVID crisis, what did you think at first? And how did y'all move in Atlanta? Because the thing about Atlanta, everybody understands it or calls it a black mecca. And it might be for some black people that are the 1%, but the majority of Atlanta is gentrified. I mean, not everyone is like employed, and it's a weird dynamic in Atlanta because everyone in power is African American for the most part. So I wonder how that work happens where you have to be like, yo, you just put the National Guard in our streets, Mayor Keisha Lyons Bottom, or the Black Chief, and all of that kind of stuff, because Atlanta does have that history of being a place of movement. But the reality is it's been incredibly hard for so many people in terms of the economic or what people would think is everybody, at least in Atlanta, that's black is getting by well, which is absolutely not true.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, I think it's for, I know you know it, when like these tipping point moments happen. It's like something in the air shifts, you know what I mean? There's something in the air shifts. You can like smell it, like, okay, it's about to go motherfucking down, you know? And I think you know, one of the things that I begin to think about, and I think many of us begin to think about, was one, all right, y'all, we know we don't continue to to harvest the lessons of every time this happens. What is our infrastructure? What do we need to be able to support folk on the ground? What do we have? You know what I mean? That's assessment. All right, who can move goddamn bail? Okay, who's looking at, you know what I mean? Like folks just begin to start making offerings, you know. Okay, we're gonna need folks who train marshals, who can do immediate trainings on the ground, because folks is out, you know what I mean? And so I think that's a lot of ways that particularly the organized left, if you will, of Atlanta begin to move, you know what I mean? Get on the call. Or, anyway, but I think you just know in the air when there's, and then you got Breonna Taylor happening, and then you got Tony McCade happening, and then I think that somebody told me at least since George Floyd, there's been at least 30, maybe 100. I ain't looked up the numbers. Somebody told me this. Other police killings, right? But it's something about when the heinousness of it, I guess. Yeah. I don't know how to fucking describe it, but it's like watching a lynching. It's watching a lynching, and I think, you know, there was always times, I understand it, where our ancestors, there were times where the whipping post would be, you know, front and center. And then if a slave gets beat or a enslaved African is being beat, they make other enslaved Africans circle up and watch. And there are times where in my spirit, I know that there were days that they say, you know what, not today. We see this stuff, y'all made it normal, but not today. We are finna go and burn down a plantation and shank the master and do whatever it needs to be done for freedom. And so I think that I think that happens, you know, as African folk and folk across the diaspora. That's how it be, you know. And for folks,
and you had already known about the Ahmaud Arbery case, and I don't know if it's 100 that since George Floyd. I think what is happening is a lot of the lawyers are now beginning to release the footage of their clients, or police departments who fought to keep it are losing. So we see this new one with Elijah McClain, who's walking home. He's anemic. He has a mask. They stop him. Then they kill him. And then other cases, we've had 3 Latino brothers just in California. Killed 2 more in Houston. So what they were doing is they've been hiding everything. And now, like every day, we're like getting the video of what happened last year. So y'all were already with Ahmaud Arbery. And then I think with the George Floyd, to me, that how you said, we were watching it in real time, but I think what it really was too is that the people who were taping were like, you're going to kill him, stop, please stop. And I had never heard usually the people who are taping or watching the police, and you could see the desperation, you could hear it. And then I was like, I think most of us would be like, well, we would jump in. And I was like, but would we? When we know if we even try to stop, we're all gonna die here. And it was live, and I mean, the image to this day. But this Ahmaud Arbery case, y'all knew about it before.
It
and
was
then yeah,
it was at least when it became more, because this happened about I guess that's about 3-4 hours away, Brunswick. So by the time some folk knew, I think like the NAACP chapter knew. So I think, and so the folk here knew. But in terms of how it began to spread, it wasn't until maybe 4 months later when folks began to when the video got dropped and the mobilizations, folks like that shit, you know what I mean? So there was a few months where the family was being like fought at a super local scale, you know, and then there were more folks they start to figure out.
Yeah, and the Breonna Taylor case, and all the women and queer and non-gender conforming people. I mean, I'm a little disheartened that still, when it comes to Black women, when it comes to trans queer folks that are losing their lives, we haven't reached the critical mass point that we need to reach. I think it's going to happen. You know, I mean, I definitely do think it's going to happen, but when the George Floyd, when Atlanta got in the streets and those first couple of nights, were you on the ground with folks, or and kind of like watching young people who might not be part of an organizing but kind of moving in mass? Were you on the ground when this was happening in the city of Atlanta, the protests?
Yeah. So that Friday there were some folks who called for a rally, and it was like 2 of them, some young folk. And they were going to march from, I think, the Capitol to downtown. Then some other folks called for a rally that didn't include a march. And so there was some coordination that happened so the marches to feed in, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the first, when we first, the rally, we had folks that by nature just went inside of the Centennial Park. And that's where because we were initially going to do it in front of CNN building, but then we moved over there. And by the time I left to go do, because we do mutual aid feeding amid COVID on Friday. So I dipped out. And by the time I exited the park, the streets, like the park had over flooded, because you couldn't really tell. The park had flooded out. There were folk all in the street. It was wild. Police had already, by the time, it took about maybe 15 minutes to get through the crowd, because the police was where most people were parked. So if you were trying to get to your car, you would have to confront the fuzz, you know? And so they had already turned up the tear gas, and that's the incident where you see the officer take his bike and begin shoving protesters with it.
Yeah.
If the streets was hot like that already. So by the time we get done with the mutual aid feeding, I hit the ground again, because we're like, yo, motherfucker's still out there. And this is, and the buses for and the all the tanks is being deployed. You know what I mean? They suiting up. And I remember going out there, and I was like, I remember saying, to the homies, I was like, all right, cool. This the standoff? All right, what's the plan? How long we gonna be here? Who going to jail? Who not? Let's get you prepared. Who going whatever? You know what I mean? Like if you want probation, you got you know what I'm saying? You undocumented, baby, step to the back of the line. We can't even manage. Go into the back. It ain't no shade, but you can't get arrested right now. And just begin doing some of that groundwork there, and just talking to people. And then over the next few days, a lot of it was training folk, calling for like mass training, security training. Everybody come here real quick, and doing a lot of that. We did a organizing school in the parking lot of our song office, pulled folk, because this was when the curfew hit. We were concerned. People were like, oh snap. But we did it in our parking lot, so that's our shit. And did like a midnight organizing school. And so from there we've seen more protesters begin to take formation into organizing, creating new organizations, you know what I mean? Like continuing to think a little bit more long term about it. And so we're seeing folk come to the street. I mean, there's still protesting. There's folk over at the Wendy's like still in city and mode. But I think people are also too thinking about how we're going to continue to keep this fire burning in the way that it is. Obviously, like, you know what I mean? The tanks is gone, and you know what I mean? The level of hostility with the police, not in that confrontational way. That's not what time it is. I think people are continuing to do marches, rallies, protests, direct actions, being more specific about targets, So that's been really beautiful to see in this last month.
Yeah, and they have, I mean, obviously the police have gotten their orders to kind of lay back, except for Atlanta, where they're like, we're just not coming into work. Like, you're like, this is insane. Like, y'all can literally do whatever you want. So I think there's a preparation for what will happen in November, right? If Trump loses, he might never leave the White House. He'll say fake news. Who knows what this dude's gonna do? If he wins, what the fuck? Like, this COVID crisis right now, and Atlanta also has been a hot spot. The governor is a Republican. Has been very bad on everything. But what do you all have some type of working relationship with the mayor's office, Song, or any of the community leaders that I'm very curious to know, like, do y'all have, or have they had any, or have they come to you like, hey, what's going on? Let's talk.
It's an interesting landscape. There's like Atlanta politicians, Black politicians, they're like, all right, we'll have a meeting. They don't mind, like, they'll sit and talk with you because they want to then leave out to them, be like, yeah, we talked to them, and yeah, so we done been in conversation, but won't do shit for real. You know what I'm saying? So, but so there's been conversations when we, we're able to, there are relationships that exist, with, depending on who it is, either we can call or we know Snap can call or what have you, and like get somebody on the phone. But I think oftentimes what I think a lot of these politicians, they want to call folk into the room to, you know what I mean? They're really like, okay, come here, let's talk. Like, no, Negro, get some of this heat because you rightfully deserve it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe we a few days in. No, sit back. You know what I mean? Versus like trying to come up with some real quick solutions to really big problems. And I think it's actually some BS, I think it's some BS. And I think, when it is time, there are times too, because the Black celebrity, you know what I mean, situation also happens, like they go to the room, or like folk who are like activists but not accountable to a base will go into certain rooms, and we like, yo, yeah, actually trying to engage and negotiate or whatever on behalf of folk that you ain't accountable to. And there's the folk who, you know what I mean, they don't become, and we like, at the very least, you got to record the meeting so we know how to use that to continue to, because they've been our targets. The photos popped off. We've been coming for you. You know what I'm saying? And so we've just been trying to get in better and deeper alignment about the way in which folk do that, to be able to make sure that, yeah, we don't take the pressure out of these cats, because, they know what the problem has been. They know, but they've betrayed the mission. Black folk in politics was supposed to be the conscious, with the Congressional Black Caucus used to say, they're the conscience of Congress. You know what I mean? Like, come on, y'all playing games. And some of them been in office so long that they lack the imagination, and they actually, use the same tactics sometimes that the right use, in terms of that fear tactic, and making people like, if you do that, they do that fear stuff, and and they feed into the fears of a lot of Black elders here. And I'm like, don't pour into this intergenerational divide without taking responsibility for the ways you contributed to it. Let's look at the 80s and 90s in your policy. You feel me? So a lot of this mess they with this, and a lot of this mess they so much in their ego when this is the Black Mecca, this is the home of Dr. King, where they're so arrogant that they refuse to be corrected. Even, you know what I mean? They refuse to be wrong. Like, wrong turn, baby. This ain't north. This ain't it. But they're unwilling. And when they do, it's crumb, because they operate like white people, But it's the system I set up. They didn't build this, but they damn sure ain't did nothing to try to tear it down either.
Yeah, I mean, the CBC, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, like, I mean, for me, the only congressperson that I'm like will roll with, or it's a couple, AOC and Rashida Tlaib, and luckily they won their primaries, because the Democrats don't want them there. Like,
Yeah,
it's pretty
yeah,
clear,
yeah.
and then it's like you're still just working. For me, what it really comes down to is they're also all millionaires. All the Congress, whether you're Black, Hispanic, whatever congressperson, for the most part, all of you
Yeah.
are millionaires. Capitalism serves you. It does not hurt you.
Uh-huh.
So there is no race loyalty. There is,
Oh,
and as much as like Maxine Waters and Karen Bass, they are accountable, it's still a disconnect, because I mean, for me, it's a disconnect. I don't know what brothers, I know there's poverty in Albany. I don't live in that area, but I know that I have some form of privilege, which is always fascinating that they come in and instead of letting young people do what they have to do, just like in the civil rights movement, just like in the Black Power era, because this is how you even got into office. How in 2020 do we have the most elected officials that look like us, quote, are us, and we're in the worst economic conditions ever?
and then they got
So
some of the highest income gaps in the
yeah,
country. Like what? What? Yeah,
yeah.
man.
Tandy, our producer, just said they are not loyal to us. I believe that, but
No.
I think
Like
what I
capitalism don't save us, and they either they know it or they refuse to have an analysis of it. You know what I mean? They just,
yeah,
like, what's your intent? Like, what's your, But I'm just like, you are African descendant. I have an expectation of you. I know black folk in the monolith, but we African descendants. There are some things on period we should just fucking agree on. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That should set the bar for the way in which we go hard for our people.
Yeah,
I don't.
and we have not seen the fallout economically from this crisis. We will see it when they stop giving people unemployment and stop giving people their Section 8 vouchers, stop giving people their EBT, which they're going to try to cut this summer, all of it. And the Democrats are just not doing. They're not moving forward in the way we need them to. But I'm curious also to know, because you're in song and then you're part of the movement for Black Lives and National Bailout, all of these other formations, what do you think of the amount of corporations that all of a sudden love Black people enough to give some organizations a lot of money, but all these organizations are firing Black workers who are trying to organize? What would be your analysis on that right now?
Yo, well, I think one, we know why they're doing it. You know what I mean? It's the okey doke. It's the okey doke, and we can't fall for it. But I think that I think what it does is signaling to a very centrist and liberal, audience, whether black or white, those on their conscience, like, see, look, the world. You mean me? People see, they're like, yeah, they see us, respect, whatever, whatever. Um, and like this real um watered down version of racial equality or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. And so I think that it's super damaging to how that is oftentimes seen as a measure of how we've advanced our race conversation,
Yeah.
especially when it's so basic. When it's so basic, I'm like, come on, y'all not trying to be for real about social change, because if you really believe that, then you would understand that to say Black Lives Matter, and for that to be actual action, that you have to dismantle capitalism. Like, socialism must be the option. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
they're not here for that smoke. And so them giving money, we know what time that is. And I think that, if we can, those resources being used in the service to liberate our people, damn right. And if there's a way in which we can, set up funds for the folk who's getting arrested, or to move people into organizing gigs. You know what I mean? To move, like, let's get your attention, baby. You unemployed and you mad? Let's go. You still need a check. We got resources. Let's get some boots on the ground. I feel like we
Yeah.
leverage it for the being able to articulate our vision, put out propaganda, get folk attention. Let's do some PE with folk. I think because capitalism has us on the wheel all the time, sometimes it's hard even for the folk who come out that one protest and they're like, damn, I gotta go to work now. You know what I'm saying? I like want to be in this all day, that thirst. Like, how do we do that how are we creating infrastructure whereby we can be like, yeah, this ain't permanent trust, but nor is the job sweeper working in these fucking factories or for whatever. That's because they getting fired anyway. Like, come take a chance on movement. We'll know how long we're gonna have these resources. But while we got them, baby, let's get them boots on the ground.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I do know that, I mean, I've had some conversations with some younger folks and they're like, should I take this? And I was like, yeah, but when you take it, then you want to bring in some type of policy that these corporations will have that Black workers are not going to get fired, or we're going to take the money and y'all need to do this, that, or the other, or we will eventually return it. I mean, kind of those conversations, because the co-optation is so real right now. But I also have liked the way current movements are like, we might take that, but this is exactly what we're about to do. You want to say you're about change, how much within a Catholic structure can that change be? But it's there. So we're going to show one more video of you before we wrap up. This is another video of Mary speaking.
What's this one, yo? I'll never look at it.
Oh no, I don't either. I don't even watch these. I'm like, I think we all do that.
I remember this too.
Meet up with Mary Hooks. She is now the current co-director of Southerners on New Ground, aka SONG.
Our work is to, make sure that queer and trans people have their rightful place in terms of doing our work to advance social movements. We recently purchased this building. We literally are still moving in.
For the past 10 years, she's dedicated her life to activism. Around 2015, she became an integral part of starting Black Lives Matter Atlanta.
We put out a very broad, whosoever will, let them come.
System doesn't work for us. Make another one.
I mean, we were out here in these streets, and so we also see a huge wave of burnout, a realistic assessment of where BLM right now, the chapter, I would say, is on life support, and I'm amazed that people continuously reach out to us, want support.
Now, she says she continues her work fighting for things like LGBTQ rights, bail reform, immigration, and most recently, we followed her last May as she led the Black Mama Bailout that helped reunite incarcerated mothers with their kids for Mother's Day.
It's a feeling of gratitude. It's a feeling of humility.
Mary says her goal now is to help pump life back into Black Lives Matter Atlanta and continue her reach with SONG.
It requires consistency. And so being able to have steady programs that can move out of a very large building is something that we're pretty excited about.
And Mary says SONG is in the process of launching new programs and events in the coming months, and says she's always on the road. For more on Mary Hooks, you can find Nick's story on our website, 11alive.com.
So Mary, I wanted to ask you, because you have a child. I don't know how old he or she is.
She's 7. Little Porter Lee.
So she's aware, obviously, of what's happening out there, yeah. So what has she told you or taught that kind of like sticks in your mind?
Yeah, there's this little story I like to tell about when I realized how much she was absorbing. She had to be like no more than 3. We're in the car. She in the back in a little car seat, and I see her like looking out the window, going like this to somebody. And I'm like, yo, who you doing that to? Like, who is that? And she's like, it's the police, mommy. We got to watch them. And she also, like that age between like 2-3 years old, that was like 2013. So she been like in a, in the climax, if you will, of this iteration of the Black liberation movement. And that's been like, that's as natural as eating cereal in the morning for our life, So yeah, she's conscious, and her little homies conscious. You know what I mean? She be, they had their debates or whatever. And she's also very much like mommy. We have to make crafts. You know what I mean? She's like, I know what time it is in the world. And she's also like, help me do my Dal's hair. So she's,
Yeah. Well, that
still
sounds about right.
in
I,
that
I say,
kitchen.
yeah, I say this every night. My daughter's 15 now, but it was around 7 or 8 when we were in LA, and she was like with Patrice and all the kids in Black Lives Matter. But I'm always there were 2 years, about 11 to 4, well, 3, where she was just like not having any of it. She's like, I don't want to speak anymore. I don't want to go protest or whatever. And then the last year, she's like, nah, this is bad. This is before COVID-19 and all of this. And what I tell people is that we're really good parents, but the movement has raised our daughter and will continue to raise her, just like your daughter. And I think what is special, like at 15, I definitely did not know anything about racism. I was definitely living in a bubble where I was at. And to see my daughter or all the other children just have this clear analysis, but then be like, I just want to bake some cupcakes. And you're like, right, like we can take a break and bake some cupcakes.
Yeah,
So what would be your message to younger people that are in the streets, the organizers, or what should we be mindful of as we continue this iteration of the Black liberation movement forward?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important for folks to find their people. You hear that feedback?
Yeah, get a little closer. Go ahead.
I think it's important for people to be able to find their people, to find organizing homes and political homes, because one of the things we say in the South is it's the relationships is the real infrastructure of movement, and being able to build deep with folk, not just wide. Yes, we need numbers, and we got to go wide. So we need to be able to sit in circle, ask people, what brought you here? What's going to allow you to stay? Get deep. What's in your life that you see and playing out in the news? Make the connections. So then folk don't just do it from a place of I'm upset, but it also grow into a place where we love our people so much, where we're willing to give our life in service to this thing,
Yeah.
and that way and then especially for young people, particularly in the 20s, often say the roaring 20s, one has to get your personal life in right relationship so that you can be in service to doing this organizing work. In the same way folk go to church on Sunday, they carve out 3 hours a day, carve out 2 on Tuesday, 1 on Thursday, because they do it because they believe in a thing. We must believe in liberation and the possibility of changing the world. And then we will integrate it into our lives in a way that always keeps the ongoing, steady, that slow, steady, respectful work, as the elders down here talk about, as well as being able to keep it fun, to keep bringing the smoke, confront these hoes. You know what I mean? All of them should be getting chitlins thrown at them right now. You're shitting on the poor. It's unacceptable. You know what I mean? I just think that we need to continue to stir up and awaken our political imagination in the way in which we show up, the way we show out, the way we're talking to our people about these issues. You know what I'm saying? Me and my comrades, we do, again, we do mutual aid feeding Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I have the blessing, I usually don't write that much, but I just been writing my ass off. And part of that is we write love letters. I write a love letter to our neighborhood and the folk who we serve, to be like, yo, this is what time it is. This is what's happening. These are the COVID resources. I heard they hire it. You know what I mean? And doing some of that cultural work and engaging a convo. And so, yeah, I feel like those are some of the things that we can be learning from each other and, sharing stuff. And different models of the way we're thinking about alternatives is huge right now. And I think over the next 2 years, we're going to, as many organizations have put a lot of resources into campaign, policy fights, etc., including song, and doing some of that, like, get the boot off the neck work. We also going to have to think about how we begin to shift how we invest our resources to do some of that alternative building, the models, being able to do experiments as relates to meeting the needs of our folk, being able to make interventions around anti-patriarchal violence, so we won't have Ayana Dior's getting beat up in the local, store.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we gonna have, that's a different type of work, and that's our work. Because if we keep calling the police, we see what sort of work they do. They're in the business of giving death. We got to be in the business a servant life and
Mhm.
creating opportunities for people not to lose their life in the midst of the terrain in which we're organizing in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, thank you. And Mary, thank you so much for your time. I know like all of us here, I mean, more than all of us here on the ground, but if you want to really talk about intersectional organizer, you are the poster person for it, especially really critiquing capitalism and kind of keeping our eye, as we would say in movement work, on the prize. So Mary Hooks, co-director of Southerners on New Ground, you have a space here. I'm so happy to have shared this time with you. I appreciate this time with you. And I know I'm gonna see you in the streets,
Yes, honey. Yes.
hopefully I'll get down to the South this summer before this election to
Come on,
do
see
the
us.
incredible work that you're doing in Atlanta, but the inspiration you are to like brothers and sisters and non-gender conforming people in the streets, our street intellectual brothers and sisters. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Bless. Thank you. And get a nap, sis. I heard you say you was tired, yo. Like we both get us some little rest
Yeah,
in, you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm going. I definitely need. I think we all need that. I think it's hard for us to sleep. We're having these like visual dreams and political
Yes.
imagination. But I will be taking this weekend to sleep and Netflix for a couple of days
Yo,
and get off the news. So
get it
thank you
in,
so
love.
much, sis. Take care. Be safe out there. Thank you.
Take care, love.
Peace. Oh God. Love Mary Hooks. So our political prisoner highlight today is David Gilbert. In 1970, responding to the murderous government assault on the Black Liberation Movement and on the unending massive bombings of Vietnam, some of us went underground to raise the level of resistance, forming the Weather Underground, which functioned for 7 years. On October 20th, 1981, I was captured with a unit of the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, and allied white revolutionaries attempted to take funds from a Brinks truck, with the tragic results of a shootout in which a guard and two policemen were killed. Subsequently, Matari Shabaka Sundiata Akoli Sundiata was killed by police, while many other comrades were captured and given long sentences. I was convicted under New York's felony murder law. That means that even with no allegations of doing any shooting, any participant in a robbery bears full legal responsibility. I was given 75 years to life and cannot even be considered for parole before 2056. So we have to keep fighting, as we say every night, to free our freedom fighters, political prisoners, prisoners of war behind the walls. We're going to watch a short video, I think, right? We're going to do a video, David? Okay.
The civil rights movement opened up that America was not a practicing democracy. Malcolm X raised the issue of self-determination and human rights. Black Power in '66 taught us that it is a nature of a power structure, and we had to deal with opposition to that power structure. And then, of course, the Panthers and other revolutionary nationalist groups of the period, in getting past '66 into '68, '69, really brought home the identification with national liberation struggle and the right for people to fight against their oppressive and racist regime for total independence. We were saying, and the early civil rights movement said, and STS said in the early '60s, our slogan was, we're going to shake the moral conscience of America. The idea was people couldn't know that this racism was going on, and they couldn't really know that we were supporting dictatorships in the third world. And once we showed them, that would stop it, because there's no moral conscience. We didn't understand the nature of the power structure. Days of Rage, as I said, that happened '69, and this is the period at the height of the police and FBI attacks on the Panthers, when we're really psyching ourselves up to take this leap. Even so, in Days of Rage, I remember when people broke through the police lines. And I wasn't on the front lines of that. I didn't knock any police over. I was in it. I was behind people. I followed it through. I do remember that was kind of a rush for this reason. So many times we've been in demonstrations trying to say, stop the war, having seen pictures of napalm children, knowing the level of Agent Orange being dropped in Vietnam, the different killings going on. And this was like outrageous. And we would say, you can't do this. And the police would say, okay, you can't march here. No, you got to stay here, containing our protest. So that was a sense of excitement that people could break through in the days of rage. I found out in those type of situations, street fighting situations, my defensive reflexes were very good. My offensive reflexes were pretty hesitant. So there was a situation where I was surrounded by a few police, and with clubs, and I somehow rolled and this and that and got through it. There were times when, in terms of the purpose of the demonstration, I should have been more offensive or aggressive, and it just wasn't me. It just didn't happen. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were shot to death December 4th, 1969. Fred Hampton was 20 years old, an extremely promising and charismatic leader of the Black Panthers. Not someone who's promoting the gun aspect of the Panthers that much, someone who had done, organized free breakfast program for school children, and particularly had played a really positive role in building unity. You've heard of the Rainbow Coalition, and it's an election campaign for Jesse Jackson, but the original Rainbow Coalition was headed by Fred Hampton in Chicago. And it brought together the Panthers and the Young Lords and the Young Patriots, which is a white street gang that was moving in an anti-racist way, and SDS. It was bringing together people who were oppressed or have a reason to fight the system. Between 1968 and 1971, approximately 40 Panthers were killed. And about over 1,000 were put in prison and trumped up charges. Some of them are still in prison today.
Yeah, so that's David Gilbert, anti-imperialist political prisoner. He was captured in 1981. He has served 39 years in jail. His sentence is 75 years to life. And he says, the starting point for me is identifying with other people. That solidarity, that tenderness mandates standing with the oppressed, the vast majority against the power structure. The civil rights movement also showed me more of a sense of humanity and nobility of purpose than I found in the white suburb where I grew up. So a lot of us do not use the word ally. We use the word racial accomplices. But, if especially for white folks, that don't learn this history either, it's critically important that him and Marilyn Buck, who was a political prisoner who has passed away, that they made sacrifices for Black people to be free. So yeah, please check out David Gilbert. He's in Shawgant Correctional Facility. That's about 4 hours outside of Albany, New York, where I'm at. So I want to thank everybody for rocking with us this week. If you have any ideas or anything you'd like us to know, you can hit us up at disruptthechaos@gmail.com. I want to thank our producer Tandi, and as we say every night, stay healthy, stay safe, stay up. We will see you next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. and we will see you in the whirlwind. Thanks for being with us tonight.